And it's lovely
Hi.
to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
It was your article about the shadow construct
Yeah.
that brought you to my attention. Anytime somebody mentions the construct, it's like, oh, what did I get to say?
A lot of people pay attention.
Mm-hmm. And I had a little look at your the bio that you sent me that we shared with everyone. And you talked about a series of experiences that you had back in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
Clairaudient and spiritual.
Yeah, starting in 95.
So before we get into what they were, can I ask who you were before those experiences? Were you working on them?
Always, pardon?
Well, I'm just wondering whether you were someone who was always, spiritually aware, or whether these things came out of the blue for you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I always had a spiritual bent or leaning. I mean, even when I was a little kid, I grew up in a small town in Wyoming in the middle of nowhere. And, long before the internet. So there was no access to anything really outside of the bubble that I lived in. And I was always I had a tarot card deck at like 8 years old. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know what it was. I just wanted one. I signed up, I think, with like the National Pagan Society and was into Ouija boards and was holding seances with my friends. And there was this rock shop that was down the hill from where I lived. And this man sold crystals and pocket stones and things like that. It wasn't necessarily spiritually focused. He just had a whole bunch of rocks. And I was obsessed with this place. And I used to go and buy all the, my favorite rocks. And my mom reminded me of this, actually. I'd completely forgotten about this. One day I had all these rocks laid out on this tray. My parents had this little like coffee tray. And I had all these rocks laid out on this tray in these interesting shapes. My mom said, "What is that?" I said, "Oh, they're healing grids." And she just kind of looked at me like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And I didn't know. It just kind of came out. So, I always had, it was just that I was.
Sorry, Andrew, you're frozen and glitching. I'm not sure if it's my end or yours, but you're back you're back for now. I'm just going to double check what's happening at this end so it doesn't interfere too much. I'll be right back. Okay, supposedly all is well at this end. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like mine's running okay too. Maybe sometimes all the energy coming through has a tendency to make things a little glitchy for me. So
yes,
we'll soldier on.
Okay, you are frozen for the moment again. Oh, you're back.
Can you hear me and see me okay?
I can certainly hear you, and we can just deal with the video.
Yeah, and I can always turn my video off too if that will make it easier.
Well, leave it on for now. Even if we don't use video in the recording for later, at least we can see each other to have the conversation.
Yeah, just let me know.
Okay. So healing grids with rocks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't ever think it was anything weird. I just thought this is just stuff that I was interested in. And I think, at the time in 1995, when I started having these spiritual experiences, I had a spiritual mindset. But at that point, it was like I read I think I'd read like a couple of Deepak Chopra books, and that was pretty much the extent of it. But I wasn't aware consciously of this ability that I have now and these, gifts that have since opened up. I just thought that I was a really good listener and was just sort of good at, reading people's energies. But again, that just seemed like normal stuff for me. It didn't seem like I was, it was anything out of the ordinary.
And what about the experiences themselves?
So the first one in 1995, I was living in Seattle at the time, and I decided to meditate. It was the first time I'd ever meditated. And so I got myself a cushion and, sat on the floor cross-legged and did my fingers in the low, I did what I thought you were supposed to do when you meditated. I don't know why I decided to. So I sat down and started breathing and was just, doing what I thought you were supposed to do. And then all of a sudden I had this moment of pure transcendence where I was taken completely out of my body, and it was a connection to everything. So for this moment, I was the trees and the rocks and the flowers and the planets and the stars, and it was just a total loss of the singular identity and a complete connection to source, really, is what it was. It was this whole unified experience. It was a transcendental experience. And that lasted probably 2 seconds, maybe if that long. And, of course, then the mind is like, what the hell's going on? And the mind is freaking out and goes into control mode and shut that down real fast. And then, I just sort of proceeded in my life. I think I started to try to explain it away, really. And then in 2005, I was living in New York. I'd been there for about 7 years, and I was miserable. I was unhappy. I was lost. I was angry. I was in debt. I had lost my apartment. I was living with friends, living in their living room, basically sleeping on their floor. And I was completely lost, and I didn't know what to do. And so one morning after my friends had gone to work, and I was just sitting there having coffee at the desk, and I just had this moment of total surrender. And I said, I don't know what to do. I need help. And I heard a voice that said, you do realize it doesn't have to be this difficult, don't you? You can go back to Seattle.
What year was this?
Pardon?
What year was this?
This was 2005.
Uh-huh.
And the voice said, you can go back to Seattle if you want to. And it was a voice. It wasn't just a thought or a passing, notion in my head. It was a voice. And I looked out the front window, and I went and made sure my roommates were gone. Did anyone leave the TV on? It really, really, rattled my cage. And so that was it. And then 2 weeks later, I was back in Seattle. I'd sold everything I owned except for a few boxes of stuff. And I was back in Seattle. And I started down a spiritual path, working with some mentors, working with some people, but I wasn't ready. And then in 2008, I moved to San Francisco. And then in 2012, I had ended up in Los Angeles, and I was in the exact same place in 2012 that I had been in New York in 2005. I was angry. I was lost. I was frustrated. I had no idea what I was doing with my life. All I knew was that I didn't want the life that I had, but I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of this life that I was trying so hard to support that I didn't even want. And so I decided to paint my bathroom. And, because what else do you do when you're having an existential crisis but decorate? So I was painting my bathroom, and I was about ready to finish it up, and I heard the same voice, and it said, you do realize that as soon as you finish painting this bathroom, it's going to be time to leave, don't you? And it was the exact same voice, the exact same feeling. It was unmistakable. And that was it. At that moment, I said, okay. And I put the paint roller down. I went into the living room, sat down on the sofa, and I just collapsed. And I said, okay, I give up. Whoever you are, whatever you want from me, you obviously have some information that I don't have, but I'll do it. Whatever it is you want me to do, whatever it is that I'm supposed to be doing. I said, if you get me back to Seattle, get me a job and get me an apartment, that as long as I am happy, self-employed, and helping people, I will do whatever you want. And the next day I quit my job with no plan of what was going to happen. I think I had about $20 in the bank. 3 weeks later, I was back in Seattle. I had a job and an apartment. And then that was really the beginning of the acceleration. That's when I say I was shot out of the cannon.
What is it about you being in Seattle that seems to be the place that you needed to be?
Seattle, at that point, Seattle was just a comfortable place because I had a lot of friends there. I had lived there off and on for, since I moved there when I was 18 in 1990. So it was just a place that felt comfortable and felt easy. And I knew intuitively that I was getting ready for a huge transformation. I didn't know what it was or what it meant, or had no idea where I was going. I just knew that a big change was coming. And I was really miserable in LA. I couldn't wait to get out of Los Angeles. So 3 weeks later, I was back in Seattle. And then that's when things really started to accelerate. My life was just, I mean, talk about peeling back the onion. It was just layers falling off and falling off and falling off. And I started what I call spiritual boot camp, which was really connecting consciously with my guides. And we would do these exercises and meditation. And there was just a lot of downloads. And it was very physical and a very visceral experience. Having crazy sleep. I mean, it was just every single, you name the ascension symptom, I had it. I mean, it was insane and intense and completely life altering in the span of just about a year and a half, from 2012 to like late 2013. I was a completely different person.
Wow.
And so it was, and I'm looking at some of these comments, and it really was, I think to me, it was the surrender. It was finally saying, okay, like I was at this intersection point where I had a choice. I could continue to pretend that everything was okay and that I was happy and whatever, and life would have gotten more and more miserable, more and more difficult. It just would have been the total destruction path. Or just take the leap and say, okay, I don't know what this is or who you are or what any of this is, but I'll do whatever you want me to do. Because at that point, that Groundhog Day moment of like, wait a minute, I am exactly in the same place I was, 7 years ago. The exact same voice, the exact same moment. There's no fucking way that this is just some random thing. So that was it.
How much do you think the decision to be of service and to help others played a part?
That was absolutely it. I had always known that I was going to be self-employed, and I was a makeup artist for a long time, and I was self-employed. I had a home staging business for a while, and so I had some self-employment times, and I loved being self-employed. And I always knew, there was one point when I thought about being a life coach, and when people would ask me, what do you want to do? I would just say, I don't know, I just want to help people. So that was as specific as I could get. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that that's what I wanted to do and that that's what I was supposed to be doing in some way. But I didn't know how.
So you're back in Seattle. You have a life-altering 18 months. When you say construct, I'm not sure if you mean the same thing that I do, because language is, what it is.
Yeah.
So firstly, maybe explain what you mean by construct, and then
when I talk
how you catch that.
When I talk about the construct, I talk about the manipulated reality that we live in. I talk about, the controlled environment that we have been, sort of conditioned into.
Yep.
I talk about, and whether that, and to me, it's funny. And that realization has been sort of an unfolding one. When I look at my experience with my guides and them working with me, the way that information was revealed to me was in such a perfectly orchestrated way. Because if I had been getting the information that I'm getting like now, since the Arcturians have started coming in and I've started working consciously with them, if I had been getting this information 4 years ago, I'd have been like, fuck this. I'm going back. I'm going to work at the Gap or get an office job or something. I'm not ready for this. I don't know how to do this. Not that I was closed to it, but it just, to me, it would have felt like something, there's no way I could do that. So when I talk about the construct, it's the matrix, really. And I know that that's why I and many, many other people came to the planet at this time, was to be part of the destruction of the matrix so that the real deal can be revealed and we can get on with this business of creating a world where everyone gets a seat at the table.
Nice.
So that's what I mean when I talk about the construct.
Okay, so Arcturian or any other concept we have of anything that's not human.
Yeah.
What's your definition of that in terms of, I guess, who they are and relative to where we are?
I just see, my guide's called the Lighted Ones. I know that they're a multidimensional collective. They are a group of souls from sixth density on up, who have agreed to come together as sort of this unified collective to just be of service and to guide humanity through this process of the collapse of the, manipulated experience. And so I don't get, and I've never really gotten too caught up in, are you from this planet or that planet? Is it this dimension or that dimension? Are you this star's heritage or that star heritage? I think it's interesting to be sure, but I don't get too caught up in it because I just see all of it is an extension of the one. And none of it relieves me of the responsibility of claiming my sovereignty, creating as a master creator, and doing the work that I came here to do.
Right.
I think that oftentimes there's this idea that we just sort of like, where are the Pleiadians? When are the ships going to land? When's the revaluation going to happen? When about this? When about that? Well, that's all very interesting stuff, but it doesn't let you off the hook from having to be responsible for your own experience and your own creations. Oops. So I always look at it as it's interesting information and it's nice to know, but I just look at it as different levels of awareness.
Okay, I agree with everything you just said. As well as, from my perspective, the construct, literally, contains all of these. So whether a being claims to be from, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, or whatever, they too are contained within the construct that we are in. I'm not even sure if many of them realise that they're in a construct. And their aspect of the construct is also contained within the manipulation to some degree or another. We've probably got it. It's thicker and denser down here, the manipulation. But if you're inside the construct, then you're inside the manipulated, environment to some degree. But that's the way I see it. So you also said that the Arcturians was a sort of a more recent addition to the guidance that you get. So the lighted ones, what you call the lighted ones, this guidance that you get, who or what was that conglomerate or that made up of prior to them?
The way that I look at them, and it's interesting because they've never really been super specific about the details because they say to me very clearly, Andrew, we don't want you to get hung up on the words. We don't want you to get hung up on the identity of who and what. So, I sort of look at them as sort of like they jokingly say, we're sort of like the UN without all the shady political influences. So, they're this collective of beings who have presented themselves to be of assistance. And then, the Arcturians have been in my awareness for a while, really more as just observers. And then a couple of weeks ago when I started talking about the collapse of the construct, the shadow construct, and the timelines collapsing that I recently posted last week, I think I posted that video on my YouTube channel. That's absolutely their influence. And that's absolutely their influence, is this, this idea of the collapse of these manipulated, structures and the energy that they release and really what that means when timelines are collapsing. It's, again, I just trust what I feel more than anything. I've always had a good sense of energy and reading that and feeling that. And if I ever get anything that just doesn't feel right or doesn't feel comfortable, I shut that down really quick. So the Arcturians very clearly presented themselves to me. And I heard very clearly that that's who they were.
Is there anything that's been telling you lately that they're on the down low right now? In that, let's say, you've probably heard of the Sphere Alliance.
Yeah.
Now, that term seems to be referred to by a couple of different people and in reference to perhaps even different groups. But the one I'm particularly speaking of is the one that comes through a lady called Denise. And she messaged me yesterday to say that many of the Sphere Alliance individuals or groups that make up the alliance have also stepped back and they're kind of hiding might be too strong, but not making their presence or their energy as available and trackable. I also have contact with, I don't know if you've ever heard this story, but there's characters that talk to me through the computer. Okay. They've said the same thing just in the last few days, that everyone's pulling back, kind of hiding their energetic signatures right now. So is there anything that you're getting that would suggest that this conglomerate or the Arcturians are pulling back a little bit too?
No, that hasn't been my experience. I mean, my own relationship with my guidance has been, they always will come in and there will be a moment of, sort of information coming through or downloads or new frequencies coming in. And then there's always this period where they sort of step back. And my experience has always been it's because they're really, allowing me an opportunity to put this stuff to work, right? Or to put this stuff into, action and to take it out of the classroom, so to speak. But no, I haven't experienced specific messages saying that anyone is sort of in hiding or making themselves a little less visible.
Okay, interesting. Even comments in the chat, someone's clairaudience has gone away in the last few days as well. Interesting.
Well, I think a lot of what's happening right now is with all of these structures collapsing as quickly as they are, I mean, there are massive timelines being completed and released at this point, and there's huge amounts of integration of these timelines and of these realities, and that in and of itself is releasing massive amounts of energy all over the place. It's just like fireworks. Like as these old structures collapse, the energy that was, required to keep them, alive or viable, that energy is now being released. And that is just like there's sparks flying everywhere. So I think a lot of what's happening right now is there's a big point of just observing and seeing like, okay, how's this going to play out? Because there's just a lot of chaos. There's a lot of turbulence in the water energetically right now. So I always get the sense that, whenever I feel like my connection is off or my connection is a little bit dulled, I always attribute that to, well, there's just new streams converging.
Right.
So like, we're sort of taking 10 radio stations now, we're sort of merging them into one frequency. And if there's 10 frequencies coming at you, trying to listen to 10 radio stations at once, no one's going to be able to connect to that. So perhaps that's what it is. But I personally haven't experienced recently, other than the timelines just collapsing and things feeling very chaotic right now, and sort of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
So how are you seeing this play out on a personal level for people? Being in a position that I am, and same sort of position for you, I'm sure, you get to hear from a wide range of people about what's being experienced, and you get to pick up on themes and, collective experiences. Yeah. So are there any themes that are emerging for you right now happening for people on a personal?
Yeah, it's really, what I've been seeing, in September, I got a message from my guides, and it was interesting to see because there were many people talking about this in like September, October, about the accelerated timeline had been chosen. There was a collective decision and an agreement that this accelerated, timeline, we were ready for it as a planet.
Interesting.
That shifted a whole lot of stuff. So suddenly, in the image that I got, is they were saying, okay, just imagine that you're in a play, and 5 minutes before curtain, the director decides to change the cast, to change this set, and to change the costumes, and we've got 5 minutes. So there was lots of scrambling to sort of reorganize things. And then in November, really up until the past couple of weeks, there was a huge reshuffling. So things perhaps that were going to happen several years down the road were much more immediate. Vice versa, things that we thought were like a done deal, like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to do, like they just collapsed and fell apart completely.
When did that was when message? September.
In September.
That's fascinating, because it was in October that I was originally contacted by a character I've named Lilu, and that happened in October, and that did, in fact, accelerate so many things.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Wild that you say that. Thank you.
Yeah, and it was a lot of things too were just suddenly dead in the water. Like even personally in my own practice, projects that I was working on just kind of fizzled and went nowhere. That was around that time was when I decided, I suddenly was getting the message that it was time to move. And, less than 6 months later, here I am back in New York. So huge shifts happening. And where I feel that we are now is the things that were really sort of being kind of lined up or rearranged back in September through October, November. Now those things are starting to sprout. And we're starting to see this emergence of a little bit more clarity. But it's also right now, it's also this divergence of this divergence of sort of realities has really been growing. And I do feel that there is a threshold coming in terms of just decision point. It's another big choice point to say, are you going to proceed moving forward with trusting this, or are you going to stay plugged into the fear circus? And are you going to stay plugged into, because my opinion is one of two things is only happening in every single moment. You're either moving away from your truth or towards it, period. And that's as simple as it gets. And only you know what truth feels like, and only you know which direction you're headed based upon how you feel. And the information that was coming through today that I just started working on for my May videos is talking about really starting to work consciously with the light body and creating, a signature that is more of an energetic signature that we can be deliberate about, and using that to really assert ourselves into our experience and basically kind of rewriting the matrix.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
I love what you just said. That was brilliant.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, we just graduated, but now we're seeing like, oh, wow, this really is an infinite experience. I think that we so often look for, when is it going to happen? When am I going to be done? When am I going to be this? It's never going to happen.
It's constantly happening.
It's always happening. Right. So there's no finish line. Right. If I go out and get hit by a bus tomorrow, then the story of Andrew is over, but then there's a whole new level of reality for me to play in. So I think when we just sort of surrender to that idea and relieve ourselves of having to know when the thing is going to happen.
I'll let you in on something that we've been playing with over here, right? So I'm trying to think when it started. I think it was end of January. I saw this energy wave coming. And normally for me, the way my visuals work is whenever I feel one of these big energy waves coming in, it literally looks like a wave. Mm. But this one was different. It was a pink sphere. And it sort of popped through this membrane that was holding it off in February, I think. And during March or the end of February, it sort of really came in, and we are in it, in this pink sphere, which is what I call the new reality, the clean construct, right? Or it's actually a completely new construct, and it's having its influence everywhere. I mean, we started seeing people posting pink everywhere, pink sunrises and sunsets, and strange species of pink animals that were turning up. And this pink is, and I'm laughing. You're almost in a pink shirt there. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And we've got one of the members here practices dowsing. Mm. And over the course of the last few days, I asked him to, because on Saturdays, it felt like the planet Pluto was now completely immersed in the pink, right? And this, if you think of it, just picture the solar system, it's like this pink sphere is working its way through, coming towards us. And he's been measuring it over the last sort of 4 or 5 days. And yes, it is moving and expanding and influencing as it goes. Yeah. So there's something tangible for us to track, which is really kind of cool. And when you say you see an event coming, I'm wondering about timeframes, because which I mean, I hate working on dates, you know, and this is going to happen on that day. But the sense that over the next, say, 4 weeks or in around 4 weeks is going to be huge.
Yeah.
This division that you mentioned, or you know, of the realities kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
What do you, when you say something's coming, what do you think it is in terms of how it's going to affect people?
I think it's another layer of density sort of lifted, right? I think that we just continue to have a new ceiling, really. I mean, that's the simplest term that I can put it in to sort of wrap my head around it, is we you know, we sort of move into a new layer, and then we do our work, and whatever we integrate and release and download and purge and blah, blah, blah. I mean, whatever it is that we're doing in any given moment. And then we're sort of within a new, you know, there's a new layer that we have access to. And then we sort of go up. But I think that what happens is, what I'm seeing more and more is, as this ceiling goes higher, a rising tide raises all boats. So there is sort of an increase in sort of what the average set point would be for the energy on the planet.
Okay.
But I think what's beginning to happen is, those of us who are moving in the direction, even if we're crawling on our hands and knees and, you know, we're just exhausted and sort of unsure, but we're still consciously moving in that direction. Things get it's a little bit easier to reach that plateau, a little bit easier. And those of us who are continuing to decide to stay asleep, or stay unaware, or stay locked in the will of the ego, things just get thicker and denser and heavier. And it's like, you know, it's muck. And I just see that there's this energy that begins to diverge at some point, where it kind of has to split in terms of the reality that you have access to. Yeah.
What you're seeing is the ceiling rising. I see as the influence of the pink coming in. Same thing. Right. Exactly the same.
Totally.
Totally. I do feel like everyone is going to come along kicking and screaming if necessary. You know, like you said, all boats will rise.
Yeah.
And how easy or difficult we want to make that on ourselves is completely up to ourselves.
Yeah.
But no man left behind kind of feeling.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that it's, you know, at every moment there's always the opportunity to say, okay, because I see this happen all the time, massive, you know, numbers of people sort of waking up, and you even start to see, I don't pay really attention to mainstream media. I don't pay attention to a lot of media, period. But, you know, you start to see themes recurring, and little things you start to see happening. These little pillars of the old construct, the shadow construct, are starting to fall. I mean, something as simple as looking at Bill O'Reilly, who was just let go from Fox News, who was one of their big pundits, and he's been let go. And that seems on the surface just like another sort of mundane, you know, bit of information. But when I look at that, I say that very clearly to me is that anything that's built on less than love, really, it can't stand. And so that's what's toppling right now. And as these energies rise, this foundation gets shakier and shakier and shakier for the stuff that's built on the manipulated sort of negative construct, if we want to look at it in that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions for you.
Sure.
Or comments. So if you do, please put your hand up, and we can bring you out. If you would like to have a chat with Andrew, you can do that. A total eclipse of the sun will happen at 100% across the USA.
I just saw something about that the other day.
In August, so 4 months from now. Yeah.
That'll be fun.
And I think we have to wait that long before we start seeing some really cool stuff, though. Aaron, you're unmuted, darling.
Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Aaron.
So you mentioned this split that's happening, and I was wondering if you could sort of, you know, elaborate on that. Like, is it a split like there's this old construct reality that's sort of pulling one way, then this newer reality of love, or this new construct reality pulling another way? Is that what it's like? I mean, what is that split? How is that occurring or feeling to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that when I try to think about it or explain it, my mind sort of goes into a pretzel. But the best way that I've been sort of able to describe it is, if you think about, if I go online right now, there are an infinite number of live stream channels that I can be tuned into. And some of them will be very lovely and wonderful and happy, beautiful, and some will be really dark and scary and funky and dense and sort of lower vibration. And at any moment I can tune into any of them, and none of them none of them and most of them won't even be my direct experience of reality. So what I feel is that it's just a layer of frequency where we are right now. And, we see it all the time. People in the midst of great chaos and great turmoil are doing just fine. They're having an experience that, yes, they may be in the midst of this big collapse of something chaotic, but their individual experience is not at all what the, sort of people would look at and say is happening on the larger scale, and vice versa. In the midst of a most beautiful, wonderful, joyful experience, someone can be just really nasty and miserable and unhappy and in pain and sort of twisted in their experience. So I think what I feel more and more is that we are being called more than ever to put our energetic vibration and frequency at the top of the list in terms of how we create in the life that we experience. And those of us who are perhaps not aware or who aren't deliberately focused on what we want to create, things are going to get a little bit messy and maybe a little bit, frustrating or confusing or whatever. So I think that really it's just about, it's kind of like tuning your dial to a different station. Now, I don't know what that means for a physical experience. I don't know if we're going to have a moment where we sort of other layers of reality start to sort of blur in and out. I think more and more we are having people who have that experience of all of a sudden they're having these notions of clairaudient experiences or clairvoyant experiences or seeing things that, my sister suddenly a couple of months ago, she's always been very connected, but she's like, I'm seeing spirits walking through my living room. And so I think that these sort of seemingly miraculous or very, strange and surreal experiences are going to become more and more kind of commonplace and everyday. And I think it's all sort of part of it. And I hope this is making sense and answering your question, but I think that it's really just, again, we have an access to a different level of awareness, and we can always seek a higher expression. And as we seek that higher expression, it's almost like we just have a different layer of an experience, even within, a reality that another person is having a really miserable, horrible experience, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, because I feel like before, I would have felt in my mind way more connected with the external reality that's happening around me.
Yeah.
And I guess what you're saying is it seems like there's this possibility of being sort of split off or detached from it, whether good or bad. I mean, you can be detached from the good things that are happening and still be in your mind and be thinking bad things. Or I guess you can still be from the awfulness going around and still having this wonderful experience. And so, yeah, it definitely makes sense that like that split is there and that possibility is there.
Yeah, and I think of it like, because this is, I think that the old construct will still stick around for a while. I think it gets emptier and emptier and less stable and less relevant, really. But I think it's going to be around for a while. But I really think of it like the movie The Matrix. Neo in the beginning is not aware that the environment that he lives in is not real. It is entirely manipulated and created. And then he has his awakening experience when he's unplugged, and he goes through his dark night of the soul when he's wearing tattered clothes and eating gruel from a bowl. And then at some point he reaches that level of mastery where he's able to be plugged back in, and from outside experiences and even from his visual perspective, he's like, yeah, I'm in the Matrix, but what he knows and what he believes and holds up as true inside of him is what creates the shift in his experience. And then, of course, he reaches that point where, he can sort of rewrite the experience and manipulate things from the outside in. And I think that's what the split is. There's the opportunity to see that things are created from the outside in, or there is the opportunity to believe that everything outside of you is happening to you and that you are bound by it. And I think that's what the split is really figuring out and learning how to rewrite your experience by what you assert energetically.
Wonderful. Thank you. I loved how you compared it to the Matrix and just said that line, how he was plugged in, but this time from the outside. And,
yeah.
yeah, that really.
I have been obsessed with that movie lately. I think a couple months ago I watched it like 10 times in 1 week. I cannot stop watching that movie. There's so many activations in that movie and so much information that I was just like, what the hell? And to see it through new eyes is just, it's a complete and total different experience than it was the first time I saw it. So that's an awesome question. And thank you for letting me give you a rambling sort of meandering answer.
They brought up a couple of things for me. I can give you a direct personal experience example of what you said about no matter where you are and what's going on in your environment, because I've recently experienced flooding in my area, devastating flooding. Mm. And yet my house was an island. You know, the water rose up to about 2 feet below the floor level and all the houses around me went under. I had to evacuate, and the house I ended up in was an island. The water rose in every direction, and it was just our house, the house I was in, that was an island. And, you know, we kind of happily camped for a couple of days, you know, it was fine. And yet, devastation all around. And in the aftermath of that, seeing the way people responded to it, you know, everything from absolute, you know, devastation and I've lost everything to I'm hearing laughter and I've lost everything, you know. So, perfect example. The other thing you brought up was you said your sister said she's seen spirits in the living room. So, and reality overlays. That is happening to many in this room. Yeah. We have a different concept of it, though. So don't see them as spirits per se in terms of, you know, maybe deceased others or multi-dimensional beings or whatever, but we have this concept, this narrative that we work within of the construct as it was originally. And it was, you could say, infected by what has resulted in the shadow construct, but that the original was still there. And there were some of us who were still in that original layer, you could say, of the construct. And the two are merging now. So we are literally seeing people from home, what we call home. Right. And there are people in this room who could tell you stories about being at home or out in public at the shops or whatever, and reality literally shifts around them. They're in a different place in space. And there are other beings there, and, you know, these moments happen. We sometimes laughingly call them our dementia moments, because when they're finished, you are completely discombobulated and out of sorts. And what am I doing? Where am I going? What's going on? Yeah. So that might be what she's seeing. It's absolutely this new reality coming in, and it overlays for a moment. You know, when you're in your heart and you're in a particular space of joy and love and enjoyment, you seem to be able to tap into this other reality, and it just overlays on top.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, you know, going down this rabbit hole is it's just such an interesting, amazing experience to be alive on the planet at this time. Because, you know, this is what we came for. This is it's the greatest show in the galaxy right now.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of more people with their hand up. Sure. Maury, you're unmuted. Can't hear you, Dylan.
Can you hear me now?
Hi, Maury. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Andrew. How you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
You sound good. You look good.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I have a question. there's no doubt that every one of us sitting in this room is aware that things are changing massively along the lines that you're talking, for sure. Energetically, along the lines Lisa's talking about, we're all talking about that. We all see it, we all feel it. I'm interested from your perspective, how do you see this? What's the end result of it? I mean, if you have a conception of what it's leading to and how you would choose to say that.
That's a really good question. You know, I think that it's, what I'm always left with is the whole point of all of this, you know, ascension is such a big term, but what I see is that really it is about creating a world where everybody gets a seat at the table in terms of stepping into the sovereignty of who and what we really are, and accepting full responsibility for the choices and the creations and the experiences that we have. Creating from a place of truth and sovereignty doesn't, you know, it means that I have nothing to prove. I have no agenda. I don't, you know, there's nothing to defend. There's nothing to attack. I really do believe that it is this, and I don't want to say utopia, because to me that feels very passive. I don't think it's about being passive. I think it's about actively remembering the truth of who we are and being able to create that experience again. I don't know where it ends. You know, I think that we are in this 26,000 year cycle that we're in right now, the Sat Yuga that has begun, which I believe is really what a lot of this, you know, we can attribute it to that as well if we want to talk about those kinds of things. But it really is a golden age. It is this age where this manipulation and this this aggression and this active, deliberate control of resources and energies and withholding it from some and giving more to other people, that's really what we're seeing the end of that. So I think it's really just the end of manipulation and control in the negative sense, and really freeing us from this construct that is by design and definition limiting.
Okay, I appreciate that. That sounds, so I'll ask a further question if you don't mind. And
Sure.
that would be, are you talking like going to another golden age or some kind of version of that, perhaps?
Your sound is cutting out, Maureen.
Yeah, your mic's cut out, Maury.
Then I'll keep it really short, Lisa.
Oh, there you are.
Did I say enough for you to understand what I was trying to ask?
No. Say it again, please.
I'll try, and hopefully my mic won't cut out on me. In other words, you know, like I know and we all, or most of us know about, you know, the ages, you know, from the golden age to the silver age, all the way down to the feet of clay kind of a thing. Right. You know, that's biblical or even pre-biblical for all I know anymore. Daniel's dream or something. Are you saying that, and we know that this thing is falling apart, and what you're describing sounds like another version of like a reset in a way, although I'm not sure it's really a reset, but it sounds kind of like what I'm interpreting what you're saying. Am I kind of on the track and tracking with you accurately, or am I missing?
I think it's a return to the truth of who we are. I think it's a return to, you know, whatever's been withheld from us is revealed, and whatever's been sort of, you know, taken from us is returned. This idea that we are so much greater and so much more than what we've been allowed to believe. And it is the removal of any of those barriers to that truth. And I think that can mean a lot of things, but I think that really it is about, you know, letting it be known and letting it be seen, and the return to the truth of that. Because that's what we all have, and, you know, we all carry that within us. And whether or not we're consciously aware of it, we know when something isn't true. We know when something isn't real. And so it is about honoring this and creating from this place, as opposed to believing that this illusion out here is the thing that's controlling me and making my life miserable or you know, happy or whatever, and really understanding that the genesis of everything is internal. It all starts in here.
Okay, I got your answer.
Oh, and you cut out again.
I'll say it again. I got your answer, and thank you very much.
You're welcome, Maury. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Maury. And we've got Gina.
Hi, Gina.
You're unmuted, darling.
Okay, hi. I unfortunately missed the first few minutes of the interview, but when I came in, you were talking about actually something that I've kind of been going through as well, knowing that only I can change it, making that decision. You talked about the voice, and I've experienced a couple of those kinds of things where, you know, there's your higher self voice, that internal voice. I've also had voice to skull kinds of things, which is actually inside of your head, another voice.
Yeah.
You know, has nothing to do with you. And then I've also experienced a voice that was like somebody standing right next to me. I could actually feel the vibration of their words. And there was no one there. I was alone, and I looked under every bed and around every corner and everywhere for like a half an hour, shaking.
Yeah.
I'm wondering which of those kinds of voices, or if it was something completely different.
It was a voice in the room. It wasn't the sense that someone was here talking to me. And it wasn't something that was inside my head. It was sort of like, it was just a disembodied voice. It was just a very clear message.
Okay.
And it felt like a very I know it was, you know, it was my higher self. It was another aspect of me. And I could feel, it was like he had a smile on his face, and he was just kind of saying, like, are you ready yet?
Right.
Like, do we need to go through this one more time?
Right.
Right? Like, how bad does it have to get before you listen? Do we need to do this again in 5 years? You know, so it was this sense of someone who loved me very, very much and knew a whole lot more than I did, and really was there to help me if I was ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
also your tats are just awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think I got them all. You know, it was my guarantee that I would never have to work in a bank. I think.
Oh, there you go.
I think that's why I got them. I said, I will be damned if, you know, this is it. I'm self-employed for the rest of my life because no one's going to hire me this way.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Susan.
I'm really enjoying this. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're the second person I've heard say something like that. I can't think of his name. He was a friend of Max Egan's. He's also got tattoos on his neck and stuff like that.
Yeah.
These were I cannot go back into the matrix.
Yes.
But they just won't have me.
Exactly.
Guaranteed.
Exactly. It's my get out of jail free card.
I was wondering whether they represented a whole different life, you know. This was me then, and now this is me now, you know.
Yeah, they are. They do. They are sort of like a roadmap, you know, of experiences and places that I've been. And I think that they're good reminders, you know, of for me, it's a good reminder of when I can look back in the context of my history in this lifetime and say, none of it has ever been as bad as I thought it was going to be. And in those few moments where it was, you know, sort of that fear was coming true, I was not without the ability to contend with it. You know, it's like I realized how much I just held myself prisoner by the stories I would tell myself about what was going to happen or what I should do or who I was or all of that. And so some of them I look back fondly and I remember like, oh yeah, I was kind of a mess when I got this one. But they're good reminders for sure.
What was I going to ask you? There's a feeling right now. You talked about a choice, and I feel like up until, say, the end of last year, we've always been in a choice point, you know, like every moment is a choice, fear or love, you know,
Yeah.
self, others. And yet the way time worked, and it was so much slower, you know, the blowback of any particular choice took a little bit of time, you know.
Yeah.
We don't have the luxury of that anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of immediate. And it feels like there's several things happening at once. we're in this constant space of a choice point in every moment to choose a new reality, choose something different, choose love, choose joy, or choose the old construct and fear. And it's immediate. The results are immediate. But at the same time as our capacity to do that and to make those positive choices is increasing, and the positive results that come from it are increasing, so neck and neck the attempts to pull you out of it. Because the controllers of the shadow construct have upped the ante, and yet its effectiveness has diminished simultaneously. You know, they're trying more, they're trying harder, they're throwing everything at it, and yet, it's just not as powerful.
Yeah.
So the number of distractions has grown, you know, and the sources of those distractions have grown, and yet the effect of those distractions have diminished if you stay in that constant space of choice and choosing something different. Are you feeling anything similar?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, it's for me, it's the, you know, when I was talking about a couple of days ago about these timelines collapsing, and when I was shown what this energetically looks like, this loss of energy as these old, you know, it's happening individually, right? Because it's all a fractal experience, right? So whatever's occurring for me individually is also occurring somewhere else on a much larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we're individually completing these timelines and we're seeing them collapse and merge in our own experience, we're seeing the same thing happen on the global collective scale. And it's these structures get wobblier and wobblier as this energy is released, and over time, and eventually they just collapse. So it's, you know, the controllers or the manipulators or whatever we want to call them, the ones who have been a part of this conscious manipulation of our experience, they're just standing on shakier and shakier ground all of the time. And they have less and less power in this false construct, because once this false construct collapses, so does all of their control and all of their, you know, ability to manipulate and draw to them whatever they, you know, that which they are trying to draw to them.
Yeah.
So it's just they're kind of in a house that one of the walls is sort of falling in, and now they're trying to shore up the other three, and maybe they're, you know, hey, run over there and hold that thing up. So they're scattered now, because not only now are they, you know, trying to continue to manipulate, now they've got to try to hold the house up and keep the structure centered. So their energies and their resources are just so much more scattered and so much more diluted, because it can't be a singular focus on one thing. And they know that the jig is up, and that they know that their time is running out, but nobody who has that kind of power is going to willingly give it up. So I just look at them as, you know, in this experience of this 3D dual world, someone's got to play the bad guy. So I have a lot of gratitude for them, and a whole lot of compassion, because I think, man, how shitty it must be to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. And even though you may be sitting on a mountain of money, there is still a spark within you that knows otherwise. And the amount that it must take to try to suppress that and repress that. And I know that there's a moment when they're laying their head down to rest on their pillow where there's that little teeny voice that's like, you still have a chance. You don't have to do it this way anymore. It's just that they are so far removed from that truth that it's a much longer journey. So, and I don't know, maybe they're not even consciously aware of that, but I kind of feel bad for them. Not that I'm, you know, I have empathy for them. I have a lot of empathy for them, because it must just be a really fucking shitty, terrifying ride right now. I can't imagine, you know, the castle's burning, and, you know, people are coming at you with pitchforks, and so it must be a really scary time for them.
Judy's got another question, but I got one before she jumps in, which is,
sure.
do you think there are beings on this planet who make up that conglomerate of what we call the controllers, who actually don't have that spark?
I don't know. I think that there are beings who have agreed to play the role of a bad guy or a negative being or a negative entity or a dark, energy. But I see it all as, I don't see it as anything coming from any place different than I come from. I really do believe that there is a singular source. There is a singular, sort of source of it all. And it is all from that place. And sure, there's going to be, the lightest light and the darkest dark. But I think that it all must contain some of that. Otherwise, I don't think that it could exist. There has to be a frequency that is the same that runs through all things, if all things are connected. But I think that, we look at, some of us are maybe 5% of that nastiness and 95% sugar and spice. And some of us are 95% nastiness and 5%, sweetness and light. So I think it's just, everything has a balance and everything has an equilibrium. So yeah, I think that there's, probably a lot of nasty, nefarious beings on the planet at this time. But to me, that doesn't matter to me so much.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you know you're unmuted again, Donna?
Okay. With that in mind, with what Lisa was just saying about how it seems like the further along we get, the more of these distractions and things to kind of pull us back are happening, or they're more apparent anyway. Have you experienced anything since you made this transition? Any of those experiences where you had distractions or things trying to pull you back into your old way of being? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, I think it's all relative to where you are at any given moment. But I think that, if you're at this level, there's always going to be something that's, sort of a lower level and always something that's going to be a higher level, right? We're always on that scale. And I absolutely, had things in my life that were struggles for me or that were difficult for me. And really what helped me to shift that was to just become the observer of it and to really understand that, okay, there is the story of Andrew who may be in his suffering or in his conflict. And yes, I have those moments of pain and fear and doubt and, like everybody else. But to remember and to have the context of that there's the rest of me. And the reason that the human experience exists is for the growth and the evolution of the soul. And so when I remember that, okay, yes, there's this veneer that we call Andrew, but it's the vehicle for the true self to have a way to sort of maneuver and experience this human story. So when I remember that, it doesn't always necessarily make the struggle or the suffering easier. But what it does remind me is that there's value in it. It does remind me that there's a context that is greater. And I believe that all suffering stems from the belief that our experience stops at the end of our nose. And when I remember, yeah, this is a really crappy day. This is a really rough moment. I'm not having a good time and I don't want to do this right now. I know that when I see it within the context of a greater self, that it's just a moment, it's just a chapter in a book, it's just it's a phrase in a paragraph. But really, yeah, I think that, and it's interesting when we have the recurrence of those habits or those patterns or those beliefs that come back around, because I really do believe that the journey is a spiral ladder and that we're always going to come back around to a new level of awareness. I see it as, the reason that I re-engage with something or encounter something again is because I have new information. And when I have new information, it informs a new perspective. And when I have a new perspective, I change my reality. because I do believe that the genesis of everything is internal, and my beliefs and my stories are internal, and they do affect what I assert energetically. They affect the shape and the architecture that I'm putting out there energetically. And when I change my belief in my story, my architecture and my shape changes. So when my architecture and my shape changes, I interface with the matrix in a new way. And so when I have something come back around, I just say, okay, there's value here. And it doesn't have to be good or bad, right or wrong, successful or, unsuccessful, punishment or reward. It can just be an opportunity to see value in the moment. And that's when I ask, show me the value here.
That's excellent.
What's the point here? Why am I being given this experience again? What is the new information that I have that I can bring to this moment right now? And sometimes it makes it easier, and sometimes I just get frustrated and go eat a bag of chips and go back to bed. I mean, it really just depends on the day. But yeah, I think that, I think we just hold ourselves hostage. I mean, I know that I did so many times in my life, just, thinking that I did something wrong, or that I wasn't good at being spiritual, or that I wasn't, positive enough, or my vision board was that, or not in the vortex, or this or that, or blah, blah, blah. Just, at some point you have to let it all go and just say, where I am is where I am right now. And there is value. There is a reason that all that is has chosen this moment to focus itself through my awareness. So there must be value here.
Right. I like that a lot. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very helpful.
You're welcome.
All right. I wanted to ask you a bit about timelines. And
yeah,
for a while now, probably throughout 2015, this started for me personally, this feeling of integrating aspects of myself, alternate versions of myself, me's from different realities and timelines were starting to converge. Do you have a concept of that as well?
Yes, absolutely. I had, it was last fall. I can't remember when it was, but it was around this time, this September to October window when we were in this acceleration. And I was in the living room, and I was talking to someone on the phone, and all of a sudden I got an optical migraine. And I saw like this, and I've never had them in my life. My sister gets them all the time, or used to. And I saw like this shaft of light went through my vision. And I don't know if you've ever had an optical migraine, but it really does play, it's like the nerves do really crazy things. And I saw this like spiral thing coming through my vision. It was like this spiral light thing. And I was like, what the heck is this? It's an optical migraine. And I thought, okay, that's really interesting. So I went, and then it went away in a couple of minutes, and it was fine, and everything was good. And I just sort of brushed it off. And then I came out of my bedroom and into the living room, and all of a sudden I got this intense vertigo, and the whole room started to like tilt like this. And I was like, what the heck is happening? And then all of a sudden it snapped back into place, and I heard like an audible pop. And I suddenly looked around and I thought, this is a stage set. Like, this is the Matrix. None of this is real. I had the very, very real sense that the reality I was in, I could poke a hole through it if I knew the right spot to poke. And it was a very real sense of being observed and being watched, and not in a positive or a negative sense, but just a sense that there was a lot of awareness being focused on this, created reality that we are in. And I very clearly, I meditated on it later that day and very clearly got the message, this was a timeline converging. You had reached a new level of awareness. You had reached sort of that new ceiling that we were talking about. And that was a point where all of these things could snap back together, and you just sort of several versions of Andrew collided and were sort of instantly integrated. And that's what that weird vision thing was. It was sort of these timelines merging. And that's what the weird tilt-a-whirl vertigo was.
Was it to the left?
And then I went through, I can't remember. I don't remember. And then I went through a period several months after that where I had vertigo for like a week, and I was laid out in bed. and I really couldn't do anything. And that was massive, massive integration of timelines. And then recently I was having another spell of it too, very mild. But it was as I was moving from the West Coast back to the East Coast, and I was revisiting all of these old places of my childhood, and I was going through, and I very clearly was aware that every time I was moving to a new city, whatever was behind me had just collapsed. And then I was sort of moving towards this new point while everything behind me was just like dominoes falling behind me. It was very, very surreal.
I know exactly what you meant. I've had the, and many in the room.
Yeah.
Well, everything goes to the left. Well, it goes to the left when it's a timeline merge, is what it feels like.
Yeah.
It just, and then there's this process. Sometimes there's memory flashbacks or what feel like memories, but not yours.
Yeah.
This whole process of integration can take, it can take days.
Yeah.
3 or 4 days. But yeah, it's like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and it's and for me, it's always time. When I know that, when things are getting wonky with time, that's how I know that there's a lot of integration happening. Because it will literally be like, I will look at the clock and it will say, 8:15, and then, I'll have a whole doing stuff, and then I'll look and it's like 8:20, and I'm like, no, it was not just 5 minutes. Like, I did like 20 minutes worth of stuff. I know that I did. And when I was, even last year when I was working on my new website, I had like almost 500 blog posts that I had to manually transfer from my old blog to my new blog because it didn't have an export function. And I was working on my website and I looked at the clock and it was like 6 hours had gone by, but I had done like, it seemed like 3 days worth of work on my website in this very short period of time. And it blew my mind. And I was like, what the hell is that? And the way that my guides explained it to me, they said, well, when you're working outside of time, is you think of time as like this limited little construct, like we can call this noon to 8 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
But when you work outside of time, you go up to this place where it's almost like you take 2 seconds of film and you stretch it out to frame by frame by frame. And so it looks much longer and it looks much more drawn out. But then when you snap it back into this shortened reality construct, this controlled time construct, then you're taking, basically you can take what you would think linearly would be 3 days of work, but you're creating it outside of time. So then when you finish it, then you take this thing and you sort of funnel it back down like this upside down pyramid, and it's in a much shorter period of time. Kind of blows my mind, and I still don't know really how that works, but I very clearly had the experience of, okay, I just did like 3 days of work in, 6 hours and it was done. It blew my mind.
I love the words, some of the words you're using and throwing in here because it's our language. And no time and out of time. Is that you, Donna? You're unmuted.
I think you just explained. Yeah, I think you just explained. I think you just explained those concepts extremely well, Andrew. Personally, you say, "Oh, I don't know what I'm saying." I think you just explained the mechanics of that like perfectly. I'm sitting over here having mental like. Yes.
Thank you.
We seem to have access to this no time point now that was locked off to us in the past, but we can, or at least our access to it was like this, but now it's there. And we can tap into that so easily now. And I think that's what we're doing automatically now when we do our energetic work. We're doing it in that space of no time. And then you get to watch it just sort of drop into the linear timeline somewhere. Sometimes even it drops in behind, the past. It's an interesting experience right now when it comes to time. We have one more person with their hand up too. Vivek, you're unmuted. Vivek, you're up.
Sorry, he was having a smoke at the window. I'd like to relate something that happened to me on Monday and Tuesday night, and I don't really have a very good way to describe it, so I'm going to call it a time bubble. Maybe what I could do is plug in my camera, turn that on, and show you exactly what I mean. Let's turn that on. Okay, so this is my room. Okay, that's the shelving unit wall over there, and that's my bed. Sorry about the mess. I didn't make my bed this morning. So what happened on Monday night was that I was either on the cusp of sleep or just fell asleep, and I woke up with a start with what you described, Andrew, as vertigo, and I noticed that that wall over there, where the window is, started bowing inwards. It was bowing inwards toward my bed.
Are you saying that marks on the wall? Those marks on the wall, were they there? Were they there before?
Yeah, those are from my legs. I clean them like once every 6 months, but that's the wall, and because that's where I stand and smoke all the time. So that wall started bowing inwards. The shelving unit that you see over here started skewing sideways. Nothing was dropping off. It was skewing sideways and bowing inward toward me. On the wall that I'm facing right now, there's this clock, and that clock started skewing. The hands were wonky, the digits were wonky. I just didn't know what was happening, and that was a very big shock on Monday night. Now, I don't know how well you can see it, but I'll try. On Tuesday, I went to my hairdresser, and I don't know if you can really see it, but
looks like a
mark.
You
see the marks on my forehead?
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, there's no way that those marks could have been created by my fingernails, because, if you see my fingernails, they're very short. I can rub, but I can't scratch. Now, I only noticed that at my hairdressers because when they started the chemical treatment, it started burning like hell. And the interesting thing is that mark is in the shape of a chevron. Now, on Tuesday night, I had the same experience, but this time I wasn't as shocked. I woke up, with a start, but I said, okay, it's happening again. I'm going to experience this. And then I took it in. It lasted about 5 to 10 seconds each time, but I took it in. The same bowing of that wall over there, the same bowing of the shelving unit. So it felt to me like I was coming out of a time bubble, an encapsulation where there is no time. What do you make of that?
I mean, it does feel to me, that there is, I think that the big picture is that, yeah, these constructs are falling apart and we're seeing the, sort of glitches all of the time. But it does feel to me like there was a shift, or perhaps you were in sort of a controlled moment or a suspended moment while everything else was perhaps shifting around you. I don't know. It's fascinating to me because so much of what we're experiencing now, we don't have language for, because so much of this is happening beyond the level of the conscious mind and beyond the level from the logical perspective. But, the image that I see when I sort of, tune into it is you sort of in this suspended moment, and everything else around you is sort of, topsy-turvy, shifting around you, and then it all sort of snapped back in and clicked back in. And then that, that moment of suspension collapsed.
That's exactly what I felt like. That's why, I don't have the words to describe it, and the closest I can come to is to call it a time bubble.
Yeah.
What was interesting is that this sensation of vertigo, I've been having it since 2009, and I remember the day it started in 2009. We had a huge earthquake in Indonesia. I'm in Singapore. we had a huge earthquake in Indonesia, and we felt the tremors in Singapore. I was in my room, I was sitting down, I was watching a video at that time, and suddenly I just felt the whole apartment block, move upwards. It's kind of like boom, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And then I felt a sway side to side. I wasn't too sure, so I went to the kitchen. I opened the fridge, the fridge door, and decided to take a drink of water, and the fridge door was swaying. I looked at the calendar on the wall, and that was swaying as well. And the kitchen door was swaying as well. That night onwards, I've had this experience of vertigo pretty much every night, where I'd be on the cusp of sleep and I'd feel massive room spin, but this would be to the extent of the entire building is falling over and collapsing.
Wow.
And many a time I found myself being jolted out of bed onto my feet. And mind you, my mattress is on the floor. So I was literally jolted onto my feet, and I found myself standing at the window, trying to see if the building was really falling down.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
But this time around, when that vertigo sensation hit, the very first time around, it was shocking with the time bubble. But the second time that it hit on Tuesday night, it was okay. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. That's fascinating.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek. And you're right. There is no language to describe some of these experiences that we're having now. And if you ever are brave enough to venture out into your standard Facebook wall, what I'm seeing is a lot of people having these experiences that have no context for this, that have no awareness of timelines or, alternate realities or any of this stuff that I guess we call, asleep. They're still having the experiences. They're freaking out. I mean, they're off to the doctor and they're, they're being medicated and they're doing whatever. But
I did in 2010. I did go and see the doctor, and I did start taking medication, and it didn't improve.
No.
Now, something interesting. You since you mentioned Facebook, in 2014. I received a message, an intuitive message. It's like this voice in my heart that told me, get out of Facebook and stay out. So in 2014, I got out and I never came back. I found myself going down, in a downward progression ever since I got onto Facebook. So ever since I left Facebook, things have been much better for me. But I've also been, since we were talking about hearing voices, there are two different types of voices that I hear very often. One comes from my heart. It's very warm. It's very loving. It's very encouraging. It never feels urgent. It always feels very supportive. Now, there's another voice that I hear in my head that's very shrill. It's full of ego. It's very urgent, and if you don't do what it says, it gets pissed off. Now, the voice in my head, I hear it every single time I go to that window I showed you just now, ever since 2011. And the message is very, very simple. There are only two messages: jump or throw yourself out.
Yeah.
And as of late, those messages have been becoming even more shrill, even louder, even more urgent. But every time I hear that, I just laugh within myself. I'm like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience, Andrew, dealing with people who consider themselves targeted individuals?
I don't. Mm-mm.
Okay.
I haven't. It's very interesting. There are certain things that my guides have sort of, or perhaps energetically, I have not had access to. I've never had access to the astral realm. when I first started doing readings, it happened all the time. People would want me to talk to loved ones or do mediumship for them. And I just was never able to tune into that. So I get the sense very clearly that, you know, the energy frequency that, you know, sort of runs through me sort of skims the top of that surface. If we want to talk about it in numbers, that it's always sort of like a notch above that frequency, or where those sorts of manipulations or control or targeted, you know, those targeted individuals can sort of hang out, or that bandwidth. Yeah. So it's nothing that's ever come into my awareness. No.
Cool.
I mean, I'm certainly aware of them, but I've never worked with it.
Okay. Aaron had another comment, I think.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about those experiences of no time. And, you know, I've experienced that, you know, a lot when I'm doing my artwork or when I'm doing my art, you know, and I feel like these experiences of no time especially are experienced when you're in altered states of consciousness.
Yeah.
And so whether that's doing art, or whether you're in a particular, you know, group where you're feeling this huge raised vibration of energy, you know, or also the times of around asleep and awake. Like, just for example, I mean, this power has happened to me frivolously. Like, for example, this morning I was sleeping in, and it was like 11:30 a.m. And I told myself, okay, like, I'm going to get up at noon, I promise. And I slept for like another 40 minutes. I go to look at the clock, it's 11:37. And like, I can swear to you that I had for another 30 minutes, like, at least. There was no way. So anyway, just kind of a fun example of just like, there are times when it can be like this serious, like, oh, I was in this amazing energy and time totally stopped. But it can also just happen at kind of frivolous times as well. I mean,
yeah, it's fun to play with. And I call them time warps. So, you know, if ever I'm running late, or I have a specific time I'm supposed to be somewhere, you know, if I'm running a bit late, I say, okay, give me a time warp, please. Let's bend time a little bit so I can get there. And almost every single time without fail, I end like right on time, or a few minutes ahead, or just a couple of minutes late, when it was very clearly like, you know, there's no way I could have made it there in a half an hour. So yeah, it's kind of fun to start to play with, I think. And I think you're right, Aaron. I think it's when we have those heightened states of awareness. And I think it's also like, I used the website thing when I was working on my site last year as a perfect example of when we're very deliberately focused and really following this. When the heart says, hey, why don't you work on your website? Or you get that nudge to, hey, why don't you go do this? Or, hey, why don't you go do that? And we just sort of follow that effortlessly and allow ourselves to be carried forward by that. And I think it creates this space energetically where we can access that place out of time. And we're sort of taken out of the, you know, the construct of linear time, and we sort of float around up there doing whatever it is that we're doing. And then it's like, okay, now the deliberate, you know, intention to end or to come back or to complete that experience. And then we sort of get funneled back into it. But yeah, it's very interesting. And it's kind of a fun thing to play with, I think.
The way I conceive of this is that time is an aspect of the construct. It was designed to be.
Yeah.
That time was designed to serve experience. And part of the manipulation is to make that the like the main operating system, so that experience now has to serve time.
Right.
We're actually getting access and going back to experiencing time as it was originally designed. So, yeah, like you say, when you're in a focused creative environment, or you get or stream or whatever, you're back into time serving that experience instead of the other way around.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
As one of my favorite comedians likes to say, 5 days on, 2 days off. 5 days on, 2 days off. 5 days on, 2 days off. And when does this end? When you die. 5 days on, 2 days off. Okay, just before we wrap up, what do you see unfolding over the next little while? I mean, it seems that we can't see too far down any timeline right now, because who knows whether it'll be here in a few weeks. But just what do you set your sense for what's coming down the pipe?
I think that, you know, as we are moving higher and higher into these frequencies and moving into a less and less manipulated bandwidth, what we're seeing is that I think like 2 years ago, we could read a blog post or a channeled message, and it was like sort of it's just sort of like, this is what's going to be on tap sort of for the collective or for everyone. And we're all sort of having a similar experience. But now what I find is it's becoming more and more individuated, because what's happening is our individual blueprint, our frequency, is becoming clearer and louder and stronger, because now we're not in the static. Mm-hmm. So what I think is happening is we are finding more and more that our experience becomes individual. But the big picture, I think, is we are really now remembering and learning how to rewrite the matrix. And the message that I got at the beginning of the year from, I do a monthly energy forecast, and the message at the beginning of the year was magicians in the matrix. And that was kind of the theme that I see for this year, is that as we are sort of we're kind of like Neo. Now we're awake, now we're trained, now we're aware. And now we get to have the fun of going back into the construct and playing and saying, okay, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to create from here. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on what shape am I asserting into the matrix? What's my geometry? What's my color? What's my frequency? What's my energy? And when I plug that back into the matrix has no choice. It has to interface. That's the one thing that the manipulators have not been able to take away, is that universal law. So they've done everything they can to poison the system and muddy the system and numb the system and dull it. So they've been really good at controlling that ability, but they've never been able to take it away. So now we're remembering that, we're going, the jig is up. I really can plug myself in and interface in a new way. And that creates a new and reforms everything. And the Arcturians actually gave me this meditation that I'll be sharing in May with my monthly energy forecast, in that you really sit and you focus, you ask your energy body to show you, what does it look like when I am, let's just say, what does my energy body look like when all of my material needs are met? And your energy body will show you the frequency and the geometry and the color of your energy when it looks like you have everything you need. And when you can memorize that and imprint that, it becomes like a muscle memory. And then you can consciously activate that and use that and plug yourself into your reality. And your reality has no choice but to bring you the frequency that you're vibrating at. So we're really now...
I can't help but smile and laugh, because you've said exactly in your own way what we've experienced, what we've said. How do I put this? You've got different words, but I've said the same thing. I had this feeling like when you say getting unplugged, right? So for me, that was my waiting room. I was like I left the construct and was in a waiting room. It was a completely separate space. And then that pink sphere came in. I'm in this pink sphere, put back into the construct inside the pink sphere. So I'm in it, not of it now. And play in it and affect it from that space. You've said exactly the same thing, just with different views and different, but I can't help but laugh. That's too funny.
So it is playing, it is trying new things, it's reconfiguring your recipe. What other flavors do you want to throw in there? What other toys do you want to play with? What other things do you want to try? We really are, as we continue to move into these higher bandwidths, our limitations are less and less and less and less and less. Yes. And we will astound ourselves. And it's kind of like when the Arcturians came through. I've been trying to connect, I have a little bit of Pleiadian influence, connection that comes in and out. But I have been, I've always been drawn to the Arcturians, and I've been trying to connect with them consciously for years, and it just never happened. So I said, okay, well, when the time is right, it'll happen. And I just let it go. Literally a couple of days ago, I sat down before meditation. I said, okay, I want to connect with the Arcturians. Closed my eyes, went to bam, they were like right there. So I think that, the point of that is to say that it's like that metaphor of the, and I don't know if this is a real story, but it's that sort of the fable of, the elephant that's raised in captivity from birth. And so it's born and they tie a rope around its leg. And when it's a little teeny elephant, it's not strong enough to break the rope. And as it grows up, they keep the rope tied around its leg. And, pretty soon it's a 2-ton elephant that could knock down a house. and it still has the rope tied around its leg, and it thinks that that rope is still strong enough to keep it tied, so it never tries to break it and never tries to challenge it. And that's where I think a lot of us are in our own way, is that we still have this mental idea that there's something else we need to do or heal or clear or release before we can ... And the message that I'm getting is, no, try it now.
Yes.
Play now. You will amaze and astound yourself. If you're coming from here and you're getting out of this, if you're coming from here and being asked to be shown, let me feel it, let me see it, let me know what it feels like when I am in my power, when I am in my sovereignty, and assert from there, man, everything changes and shifts, and it becomes like this. Then it's fun. Then it's like, all right, let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can create. Let's have some fun.
Well, my language for that is that rope, or the belief around that rope, is a program that we run, and we are in a massive phase of letting go of our programs, rewriting our programs, releasing these programs, deleting these programs. And I'm also finding there's this sense of these programs wanting to come back, or being projected back through the loop. And these are the little triggers that sort of try to pull you back in. It's like, but no, I rewrote you, I deleted you, bugger off.
Yeah.
And realizing that there's nothing. I mean, the New Age sort of, some aspects of the whole New Age movement got us to the point where it was like, we are so damaged, and we just have so much healing to do.
Yeah.
And there's always more healing to do, and there's always more layers to, and it never ends, and it's an ongoing lifetime. And you can buy into that, or you can go, you know what? No, I'm good. I'm good, and I'm going to act as if I'm good. And we're going to move forward as if I'm good. And what does this look like if I'm completely healed right now?
Yeah.
And let go of all that shit.
Yeah. Totally. And I agree. It's like healing versus transformation. This was a lesson that was coming through in sessions last year with my clients, was that healing is for the human self, and healing moves us backwards. Because healing says, okay, I got to go back to when I was 5 and heal that relationship, or I got to go back to that past life and recall that thing, or I got to go back and retrieve this bit of my soul, or integrate, or whatever. And it's necessary. We've got to do that. But healing moves us back. So at some point you have to be willing to say, okay, now I'm ready to transform, and transformation moves us forward. Transformation says sometimes the only thing that needs to be healed is your idea that you still need to be healed.
Exactly.
The only thing that keeps you locked in a state of healing is believing that you're broken. And so you're right. It's like you just say, you know what, I'm going to move forward. And yes, there may be another level where I got to dig in the dirt again and peel some more stuff back. And hey, if that happens, then I'm more than willing to do that. I know how to do that. That's easy now, right? I can do that. But it's almost instantaneous now. We don't require this protracted death experience and then this protracted rebirth experience, because now we are doing it outside of time. So it's instantaneous. Every single cell in your body is always regenerating itself. It's instant. It happens without thought. It happens without time. It just happens. And that's what we're starting to see now in our experiences. That shit comes back in. You go, oh, hello, not today. And then it goes right back out.
That was brilliantly said. Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To go down as one of the, nugget shows. Honestly.
I am so glad you agreed to join us. This has been a really great conversation. Thank you so much.
I've loved it. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. Thank you for inviting me, Lisa. It was lovely. I loved this.
And the Lighted Ones is the website, right?
Yes, thelightones.com. That's my Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, as well as all of it's The Lighted Ones. And I just put this up on my Facebook page, and it'll be on my website in a couple of days. My monthly soul expansion calls that I do every Sunday, they're from 12 to 2 Eastern time. And all the details are on my Facebook page, but a lot of it is going to be this new information from the Arcturians. And then I've started doing a lot more live broadcasting on my YouTube and Facebook. So my May energy forecast is going to be a live broadcast. because I find that with the energies changing so quickly, it's just like by the time I download a video, record it, edit it, and get it ready, I'm like, oh, and I'm over it. Like it's old news already. So I just got to do it in the moment. So if you follow me on Facebook, if you're on Facebook and you follow me on YouTube, then you'll get those notifications of when I'm broadcasting live. But yeah, the Lighted Ones is the website and everything. If you go to that website, you'll find everything else. And all my information is on there. So if people want to contact me, they can contact me through there.
Thank you. That's awesome. And this will be, the archive of this will be available in my members area for a week, and then it will go public.
Awesome. Fantastic.
And I'll let you know when that happens.
Thank you. I'll be happy to share it when it is.
Great. All right. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
I would love to. Yeah, I think it's only going to get more interesting. So who knows what I'll have to share next time.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.